got to listen to that good crack. Kyle and Nick and Danny were tree maniacs. You got to listen to that good crack. How that sober life got these guys back on track.
Welcome to That Good Crack podcast number 29. All right, lads, how are you keeping? I'm here joined with Mick and Colin.
All right,
Well,
Danny.
Dan, how you doing, Danny?
Not so bad, lads.
Hope you're keeping well out in sunny Tenerife.
Oh, Jesus, man. Stuck in lockdown. No crack at all. 4-room prison, huh? Well, at least the sun is shining. How are you getting on over there?
Yeah, all right,
Good,
not
man.
too bad.
Good. Yeah.
Looking after me 2 puppies.
Brilliant,
Keeps us
brilliant.
busy, you know.
Well, the good news today, guys, we're joined with a very special guest. Our guest on this podcast was born in County Galway and would be considered Irish musical royalty. In 1985, she recorded her debut LP, Tired and Emotional, a major hit here in Ireland. After Tired and Emotional, she drank alcohol excessively and was hospitalized more than 30 times. She started her journey of recovery in 1994 and celebrates 26 years of life without drinking drugs. A number of other records followed in the years to come, and she became a critical favorite through much of Europe. With 1997's After the Fall made her US debut, soon earning a devoted following on American shores. She has released many albums since, including her latest album, Live and Kicking, in 2018. So we are happy to welcome Mary Coughlan to the show.
How are you, Mary?
Well, there you are.
How's the crack? Welcome, Mary, to the show.
It works.
How was the green room for you, Mary? Was it all right?
You know, it just I was recording an album over the past year. I've done a lot of work this year, gigging, and here I was in somewhere flying, and I took the Cara magazine from the earliest thing because I should now be in Turk and Caicos Islands on my holidays. And there happened to be a lovely article about what do you call those islands? Caribbean.
Oh,
I've never been. So I should be just coming home from there now.
You were sitting there pretending you were on an Aer Lingus flight, was it?
I was
just like that.
I was reading the
Waiting
Cara
for the-
magazine.
Yeah, pressing the button for the air
Looking
hostess.
at all the places that I just been on my holiday. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Anyway,
I think
There you
I
go.
was supposed to be in Amsterdam this weekend. I was supposed to be in Amsterdam today, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I was-
well, head shopping.
No. Art galleries, of course.
Yeah. I was supposed to start an English tour this month as well. 13 gigs, and sure they're all gone. But I don't know. It's all very strange.
It is very, very strange times. A lot of things cancelled, and we're really grateful that you came on the show as well. And one of the big things for us is obviously this show is being about our journey in life without alcohol and drugs. And I wanted to get a bit of your background, obviously, for our listeners. Was one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, what was the kind of catalyst or lead up to finally stopping the drinking and getting sober?
No, no messing around here, Mary.
No, that's straight into the nitty gritty.
No, I messed around with a bit of smoking dope and drinking cider in fields when I was a young one, But when I didn't grow up, when I left home after my leaving cert, I went to London, and I lived there for a couple of years. And came back and I had met somebody there. Anyway, blah, 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 long story short. I got pregnant when I was 20. I had my first daughter when I was 20. I was really into macrobiotic cooking, which is like really strict. Almost nobody had heard of the word vegan at the time. And, I was very, very, very committed to that. And I raised 3 children I gave birth to 3 children in the space of 6 years, breastfed them all, and did all sorts of cooking. I was the great Earth Mother. I wrote for a health magazine and lived in the west of Ireland, and everything was happy, Everything was kind of going along according to plan. And then I started to sing. And I sang one night and somebody heard me singing and he said, you should, do this, Anyways, So that was like in about 1979. 1984, finally got the first album together and had my first gin and tonic. I never drank during all of those years of having babies and breastfeeding and natural childbirth and all that. And I was 29 when I started singing. I had my first gin and tonic when I was 30 for my 30th birthday in the Pink Elephant nightclub in Dublin. And I'd say a year later, I was drinking 2 or 3 bottles of vodka a day. I had met somebody else. I had left my first husband. Fast forward to 1989, and I was pregnant with my 4th child with somebody I had met in America. And he came to live in Ireland. And I just, as naturally as you should, stop drinking when you're pregnant, stop drinking. And I made it the whole 9 months through the pregnancy. And I said, wow, that was kind of weird, you know. I had a little thing with alcohol there for a while. I was buying and drinking 2 or 3 bottles of it, vodka a day and pass it out. And then Claire, my daughter, I wrote a book about all this, so, you know, it's kind of out there and I've talked about it. Claire was 6 weeks. I never drank the whole pregnancy. And when she was 6 weeks old, I got up one morning and at about 11 o'clock, I just don't know what. I was going up to the shop, to Tesco's, and we had an au pair. And I just went into the off license and bought a bottle of vodka. And I came home and I drank it all. And my husband came home at lunchtime and I had passed out on the kitchen floor and I had a piece of bread and butter stuck in because I had been off the drink for like a year. I never thought I was an alcoholic. So then I said, Jesus, this is weird, you know. And I didn't remember going to the shop. I didn't remember coming home and drinking the vodka all in one go. So that became kind of normal for me for a few years. So for the first 2 years of my daughter's life, I was hospitalized 32 times for alcohol poisoning.
Wow.
So I drank for 7 days and I would get really, really sick because I didn't eat. And I was brought to the hospital and by ambulance usually. And the last time that happened to me, I went into a thing called some sort of metabolic acidosis, which was your body went into shock and my organs started to close down. And I was brought from the Mater hospital, from one hospital to another hospital where they had better, I was intubated like everyone's talking about now. And I was put on one of those breathing machines and it was March the 16th. So my daughter Claire was 2 in November, and by March the 16th, that was where I ended up. So I was laying in the bed and, you know, I couldn't breathe. And one by one, my elder kids came into me and told me they hated me and they never wanted to see me again. And I was not to come home if I made it through, because they were sent for, because they thought I was going to die in the hospital. So they sent for the family. And so I was laying there on St. Patrick's Day, I remember, like hooked up to all these, I was on oxygen, then I was intubated because I couldn't breathe for a while. And then that whole weekend I was, and when will I be able to get out of here and go for a drink? And, you know, so that was my last drink. It was my last drunk. I went into the Coughlan Centre. I went to stay with a friend who I met through AA because they wouldn't let me go home. So I went and stayed with her and went to the Coughlan Centre for, you know, like to be assessed and stuff, and went home and packed my clothes. And the very funny thing is that I was the main breadwinner in our house at that time. And I had 2 gigs, one in Waterford and one in Limerick. So I did the 2 gigs so that I could pay the mortgage. And then I went into the Coughlan Centre. and stayed there for 6 weeks. And the day I came out, I drank again. I don't know how I did it. I went out to the shop and then I just phoned them. I bought a naggin of vodka and I phoned them and they said, well, just come back, you know. So I went back the next day and I started to do counselling, one-to-one counselling with a woman called Maura Russell. And then I committed to doing, 2 meetings a day for a while. Sometimes I think I did more sometimes, but they were I used to go to Bray every day at lunchtime, and somebody would generally collect me in the evening, or I would go someplace with somebody for 6 o'clock. And so that was my life. I promised to do that for 2 years, and I did group meetings with group therapy meetings from the Rutland and Tuesday night with one concerned person. We all met in this huge place in Dublin. So sometimes there were 30 or 40 people there. And you just kind of went about telling how you got on for the week, you know. So that was how I stopped. I didn't stop. Huh?
That's some powerful story, and fair play, a long time sober as well. And one of the big things, kind of like, we've had a few musicians on here before, and Mick himself is a musician as well. And like, one of the things that always interests me, I DJ'd as well, is the kind of transition from, obviously before you got sober, you were gigging, drinking, and then that transition from where you weren't drinking anymore, that you were out then playing again without alcohol. How did you find that, the initial kind of start of that? Like,
I had said when I was in the Rutland Centre, I said, I can't ever go out there again. I'm never ever going to do a gig, because the kind of the level of drinking that I was doing and taking cocaine was just like phenomenal. It was like, I might do 7 nights in London and people would be in the dressing room every night and just like bags of cocaine and speed and pills, and it was like loopy, and the thought of not being able to do that, and then I never did it really when I came home. In the beginning I didn't do it when I came home. It just stayed on the road. What happened on the road stayed on the road. And I mean, I remember once doing 10 weeks in a tour bus all over Europe with 14 people in the tour bus, like the crew and the band and everything. And we just passed out every night. We never, I don't think we ever went to bed. We just like drank ourselves stupid until we fell asleep, and then we'd arrive at the next town, another gig, start all over again, So I could not imagine a life on the road without doing that. So when I was in the Rutland Centre, a really famous album came out, like The Woman's Heart, and they said, whatever you want to do, we'll accommodate you. And I said, no, I can't do it. And they said, well, look, this is a really big thing and we really want you to be there. So I actually found some musicians who were sober and went on a really small group. I decided, like, no big rock and roll thing anymore, just like piano, bass and guitar, or piano, bass and sax. And we traveled separately to most of the gigs. We didn't go on the tour bus with everyone else because, like, I just couldn't, But I had 4 kids at that stage, and I had a mortgage, and I was, my husband Frank, my ex-husband now as well, was setting up a medical device. I mean, he came from America to try and set up this business, and I became a roaring alcoholic, So he was left literally holding the baby, So I decided after some time and a lot of talking to people at the Rutland and going to AA meetings that maybe I could do it, and this is the way I chose to do it. So we traveled in the car to the gigs, and when the gig was over, we generally left. There was no hanging around the dressing room, And then after that, I wrote to the Roisin Dove in Galway. I don't know if you know it. It's a great venue. And I asked John, could I have a gig? And he said, look, he said, The last time you were here, you fell off the stage. Fell off the stage. So I said, Asher, give us a go. I said, I've done a few now. He said, well, we'll put up, what are you laughing at? He said, we'll put up a sign behind the bar, and if you sell any tickets, we'll give you a gig. So about a month later, they had 7 gigs sold out.
Wow.
And I brought in a studio, and we recorded it. And that was an album called Live in Galway. And it was just me and the 3 lads. And that was the way I worked for years after that. Just
Brilliant.
like no frills. I started right at the bottom again, doing small places. And fuck it, it was just great, you know.
Did you notice a difference in your productivity around music and creative, like your creativity and that?
Well, over that period of time, up until now, I was just finished a new album. So I had one blip. I had one blip about 16 years ago. A brief return to taking cocaine. My marriage was broken, and my husband was shagging the nanny, and I ran out and bought myself a couple of grams. And I said, well, at least it won't be drinking. And the strangest thing happened. My eldest daughter, who's 43 now, her best friend saw me coming out of a dealer's house.
Wow.
And she knew that because her parents often went there.
Wow.
So
It's a small country.
I swear to God. So she rang my daughter, and my daughter rang the Rockland Centre, and the Rockland Centre called, and they fucking caught. So I had to go back for 6 weekend re-entry. Man, it was fucking hell.
Well, you were blessed
I
though,
was
really, wasn't
mortified.
it? When you think about it, like you were blessed, really, when you think about it. You know?
I know, yeah, but I was really pissed off at the time. But yeah, Jesus, it could have. I mean, that could have led to, you know, if I always had it in the back of my head. If I don't drink, I'll be okay.
You know.
So this is just a little blip on the thing, and it did turn out to be a little blip. But so since those, I mean, like, yeah, I've done so much work. And then I wrote a book, and 2 years ago, I had started on writing a one-woman show called The House of Ill Repute, which was about abuse and addiction and kind of a life story. And I threaded it through about 12 different songs, and I did monologues. And Jesus, people really wanted to hear them, you know. It was just a different way of working.
Yeah.
It was the same 3 lads and me, and they had never actually known the stories behind the songs, so it became very interesting. Anyways, I was doing that, and then I saw a show one night in the theatre festival by 2 directors called Broken Talkers, and it blew my mind. And I marched up to them after the show, and I said, look, I'm working on this project. I wonder, would you like to be interested? So it turned into this humongous project. I worked with an Icelandic composer, and we wrote kind of like an opera. It's mostly sung, 5 women singing all the stuff, and it delves into really, really, really dark places, like really horrible abuse, sexual abuse, violence. And there's a very graphic section in it where this young dancer from New York, Erin O'Reilly, plays a very drunken me when I was starting out in the business. And I think, Jesus, it was really hard to do, huh? But it was very beautiful because of the music. Your man composed the music. He's a composer, and he just composed this very odd, beautiful music that we sang all of the score in 5-part harmony, myself and these 4 other women. So it was all very much kind of, you realize that everyone has a story, you know?
Everyone.
You know, you meet these, I met these 5 beautiful young women. One of them was going to be little me, you know, and then there's other 4 women who were in the show, and you know, we worked together really hard for a year before, you know, like a lot of workshopping, and I'd never done anything like this. I felt like a dork, you know, but like this, we had such similar stories in many ways, and you know, and we all kind of got drawn to each other. And it's funny, you go into a room and you audition all these people, and instant connection with some people and none with the others, you know. And then you really find out like what's going on for people's, you know, in people's lives. It's extraordinary. So I have been very productive, and it hasn't always been easy. And after that whole episode, I left my beautiful home in Bray and took my 2 small children with me. My other children are all adults in their 40s, and the 2 younger ones are 28 and 23. But we've left the house 15 years ago with a few suitcases, and because I knew if I stayed there, I would drink again.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the house and everything that went on there. I just couldn't be there, you know.
And Mary, just like, you know, when you're speaking there, it's like, it's an amazing story, and obviously it's a story like you know, ultimate success, if you want to call it that, you know what I mean, the way you're after coming to. But our listeners, there's a lot of our listeners don't have addiction problems, like, you know what I mean, and I suppose hearing someone's story like yours, it's so extreme, even though it's like, you know what I mean, we would have come across a lot of them, like, you know what I mean, because we've been through similar things.
And our own stories,
yeah. But when people hear that, you know, and you know, drinking 3 bottles of vodka a day and all, it just seems so alien to them, you know, even like, and it's just to give some context, because we've kind of delved into a little bit, like, you know what I mean, that we've been saying that you don't know people's stories. Like when you met those ladies when you were doing the show, and you have a perception of people, or even you see them the way they're acting out, like, you know what I mean. And a lot of people, I'm sure, when they would have seen you at that time drinking the 3 bottles of vodka a day, it seems so ludicrous, or whatever way you want to say it, like, and they can't make any sense of it, because there is no sense to it, obviously, like, you know what I mean. But there's obviously, I know a bit about your story, like I know a bit about your past and that, but I suppose it's like what we try to put across is that there's a story behind these actions. People don't wake up one day and decide, do you know, I'm going to start 3 bottles of vodka a day, you know, I'm going to lose everything in my life. And you know, it's not, even though, you know, it seems like a decision, you know, you're deciding to live that way. No one decides, you know what I mean. And it's but I suppose to give it a bit of context, you know what I mean, it's like you did have a story of abuse, like, you know what I mean, that kind of, you know, would you believe it was the catalyst for a lot of your issues that came after with drinking?
I was abused by my grandfather before I was 7. And I remember making my Holy Communion and thinking that I was, you know, I was bad. I was a bad person. And I remember being in the bath. My mother was, because I had my hair all done up in rags to make curls out of them, and my mother put me into a bath, and I was hurting my wrist in the bath. I was trying to break my wrist. I was 7. I was trying to break my wrist so that I wouldn't have to go and make my Holy Communion. And I had no words to describe what happened to me. I didn't know what happened to me. I mean, I knew what happened, and it happened a few times, but I didn't know what it was called. And I remember trying to hurt myself in some way on the night before the communion, so that I would have to be brought to the hospital in the morning and not do my Holy Communion. And I wrote a song about it. It's called Mary, Mary. And it stopped when I was 11. It stopped with him, and it started with one of my uncles. And I really felt then, after about a year, that it was all my fault. I was complicit, because I was 11 now, you know. I mean, fuck, you know. I should know what the score was. You know, I was 11. And it was, I mean, you know, I have years of therapy, and I know that I have come to know that they also had stories, which doesn't excuse them, nor does it excuse what happened to them. But I did not know that it was happening to other people in my circle of friends or my family. And a really close friend of mine reached out to me last year after seeing the play. And she went to Canada after the Leaving Cert. And she had been, it's been in the public domain, so I'm not saying anything. It's court cases and everything. But a priest who used to come to our school had beaten and raped her and a few other girls over periods of 2 years, and they never told anyone. So we all had these stories that were happening in our lives, and we thought, you know, for some reason you don't tell, you know. And when I was in the Rutland Centre for the 6 weeks, I never told. And one day, Maura Russell said to me, Maura is just like, she was a mighty, mighty woman. She said, we know, and I suppose maybe a lot of people, she said, we know that when people come here and they have, you know, been hit rock bottom, we know that they have a story, backstory, and it usually involves either sexual or physical violence, and maybe both, and you know, whatever. And that would be true of about 90% of the people that walk through their doors. So she said, we knew, when I went back to her, when I drank the day I came home, she said, look, Mary, she said, this is the story. We know we know you haven't told us something. You know, this is about now a journey to finding out why why. It doesn't matter why you drink anyway. I mean, some people drink because they love drinking, and some people have never been sexually abused, you know, and only 10% of people like me end up in places like the Rutland Centre, you know. And I just had to find out if that was the reason, you know. So I started doing a lot of work on all of that. And for me, that was my pain, you know. And it came up all of the time that I drank. I just wanted to, I never had a drink from the age of 29 that I didn't want to be completely oblivious. It wasn't crack anymore. It was not fun. I just started to remember things and I wanted to pass out. And that's what I did. And then I would spend another month and I would just feel like the worst person on earth for having done that again, you know, drinking again. I ended up in hospital and you know, taking hospital beds from people. That's what they said to me when I was in the hospital. You know, you're here and there's somebody that needs this bed, you know. So would you ever fucking pull yourself together? But it was not, you know, I mean, I don't know who listens to these podcasts. It's not a matter of trying to pull yourself together. If we could have pulled ourselves together, we would have pulled ourselves together. Yeah. And so anyways, look, it's been 26 years, mainly, it's been 26 years since I drank. And as I said, I had a brief run-in with cocaine 16 years ago. But my family are extraordinary. All of my kids and my grandkids. And, you know, people ask you what were great things that have happened to you in sobriety. The night my daughter rang me, said, "Ma, I'm going into labor. Will you take my eldest granddaughter and will you keep her?" And you know, all that. You know, small things that are probably normal for some people, some mothers and grannies, and like that was such a huge thing for me. And they've just been incredible. But they've all been through some places like the Rutland Centre and AA. They went to the ACO, Adult Children of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you know, they got a lot of help, you know, to try and understand, you know, because I never beat them and I never did anything like that, but I abandoned them totally emotionally, because I think I remained 7 or 10 or 11 all through my adult years until I stopped drinking. I had the emotional intelligence of a 10-year-old, you know. I could deal with nothing. So,
well, Mary, like, genuinely, like, thanks for sharing that. And the reason I suppose I went back was to give context to, like, your kind of extreme drinking story, but also just to kind of put across to people that it's after bringing it up for me now, just the night before last, that's still going on. What happened to you in the hospital, unfortunately, that's still going on in hospitals tonight. You know, there's a young woman, a mother, and she's like totally taken by prescription medication addiction, and she's in a very, very, very bad way. And she was released from hospital with a nappy on to be homeless, like, you know. And it was like, because of the effects of her using, you know. And it's thankfully she's after getting help, you know what I mean. But like the way she was treated in the room, like, you know what I mean, her from her mother, like, you know what I mean, not in the rooms in hospital, you know, it was like that you're taking up this bed like it was a choice, you know what I mean, like someone would do that, and like, you know, but like, just to kind of say, you know what I mean, that you don't know what somebody's story is, you know what I mean, you think you do, but you don't, you know what I mean. And it's like, until you've walked in someone's shoes, you know what I mean, you should be very slow to judge. But the success that you're after coming through, also, like, for people that have experienced similar things to you, to show that you can come through that, and what you can do with your life after that. Because, like, no one sings like Mary Coughlan. Like, there's no one, like,
absolutely.
You sing a song, like, no one's ever going to go, oh, who's that? I wonder who that is. Like Mary Coughlan. And this isn't like, this is genuine, like, you mean. And like, I'd wonder, because the genres that you sing, like, in, like, say, a lot like jazz and kind of blues, soul, and that, like, it wouldn't be a standard thing for, and in your native kind of accent, a lot of the time you are singing, like, if the Galway comes through, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, and it's brilliant, like, but what I'm saying is that, like, there has to be a part of your life, I don't want to say, oh Jesus, like, but for me, you having that life experience, that you can stand and you can, like, I heard you singing, like, I would have heard for the first time a lot of the, like, you know, jazz and blues classics, like Etta James and things like that, from you first, as growing up, like, in Ireland, I would have heard those songs through you. And it's like not a lot of people can do them songs and do them justice, you know. And it's like, it has to be a part. What?
The pain.
Yeah, well, this is it. But, like, isn't it amazing? I was saying this to another guy. His film was made of his life. He was on here, Billy Moore, and, like, he was kind of sharing about, like, all those years that were wasted. And yes, I get it. Like, but it's like it's an amazing to have been able to, all the stuff you have created from that. Now, I'm not saying that it makes it okay what happened, or that, oh look, you know, it's a payoff. But, like, it's just a success story, you know what I mean, to ultimately come through it and to do that. And I just think it's amazing, like, I mean, genuinely, just that's and sorry for kind of going back to that point, but I think
it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, I decided very early when I came out of the Rutland, and you know, there was not that culture in Ireland at the time, like, you know, like, people who were, like, hounded to death, like Amy Winehouse and stuff. People knew I drank. Everybody drank. People, I mean, Jesus, I was lifted off the streets a few times by the guards who done brought home from outside nightclubs in Dublin, and nobody wrote about it, nobody talked about it, but, you know, a lot of people knew about it. And I'm grateful for that now, you know. So I decided, rather than that happening, that I would actually come out and talk about it, you know, myself. And I think the first interview I ever did was with Mike Murphy, and we had an hour-long radio program, and we talked very openly about a lot of stuff, not about the abuse, just about how bad the addiction was and everything. And it kind of kept me in check, you know, because now people know.
Yeah.
And I think I needed that, so that, like, even though I hated my daughter's friend for dobbing me in, years later, it was like a protective thing I was doing for myself. Like I was telling people, look, this is what I do when I get a fucking drink. I can't stop with it, and don't ever, buy me a drink. I mean, I can't do that, So it was just like a self-preservation thing. But there's still people, I get messages from people on the private messenger, and Jesus, there's so much pain out there. And I was talking to somebody about it this morning. You would just wonder what's going on for people right now, in this.
Absolutely.
And there was a woman on from Bernardo's the other morning on the radio, and when the whole shutdown things, well, actually, I shut down in Ireland quite quickly. I didn't really. I started walking around the mountain up here where I live and singing a song every day. And then I got up one morning, I was having coffee, and they were talking about the amount of call-outs for Childline and victim support and all that. The amount of stuff that's going on in people's houses with kids and with alcohol, and drugs. And school used to be their safety net, they'd go out to school and meet their friends, and it must be absolutely horrible. And then you think, like, this is such a fucking weird time, sorry my language, but and then you see India and Africa and what's going to happen, when it takes hold there. It's really a time for us all to think about where we're going and what's happening, in the world. I mean, before this crisis, there was, Brexit was the big crisis, and then the climate was the big crisis, and now we have this crisis, and every year there's a health crisis, and this is the big one, the biggest one we've ever had. And it's like people have come, and there's been such a lot of drinking and such a lot of drugging with young people, and such pressure that people find themselves. It's like it's just exploded, and it's taken this virus to just stop everybody in their tracks.
Absolutely.
And all my kids work in offices and juggle childcare and going to school and getting up at 6 a.m. and getting the school lunches, and they've all really chilled out. They're all really, really happy. They're all really they're finding the homeschooling a bit much, but the kid, my 3 daughters are actually really kind of not glad that it happened, but it's just given them such time that they would never have had as a family. Yeah. And so there's some good things that's happening right now, but I do think about people who are living in alcoholic, or people who are living with addiction, and kids and husbands and wives and men and women and whatever, up and down the country, up and all over the world, because it's not just here, and wondering how people are managing, and
yeah. No, it's tough times, as you say. It's just that mixture of stuff, isn't it, Mary? It's like there's extremely tough times for a lot of people, and perspective, like, you know what I mean, around, like, say, things like money, my time, what I'm willing to spend it on, free time for myself to do things that I want to do, because like the three of us run our own business, and it's like we're fairly proactive in things, and we're always doing stuff, and it's like, what's this, bam bam bam, and it's like, it's just been that time just to stop, and like, I've seen people dropping off their kids, like, or here in my estate or whatever like that, neighbours, like, kids crying at 7 o'clock in the morning, being put into a car to be brought down to a stranger to leave them there for the day while they go off to work. And a lot of people, it's going to change a lot of people's perspective. I think so anyway. And I am I've been saying it here for a long time. I didn't get it at the start. I was ringing people because I was connecting in more and more with people. I was ringing them, and I was noticing when they'd answer the phone, there was like a bit of a pep in them. They were like a little bit brighter, you know, and I was going, this is weird, you know what I mean? I was expecting like, yeah, stuck in here, you know, it's like getting hard. And I was like, people like, oh.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Just delighted to hear from someone.
All my kids and the grandchildren are really happy. My other daughter, my youngest daughter lives here. They have a wee cabin I have a little acre up here on the Sugarloaf, and so I see the kids in the garden all the time. But everyone's lives have changed, and my other daughter, like, she was like, I think they were like at such a level of like that, you know, like going down and trying to get the kids on the Lewis and then putting them into school and then getting the Lewis back into town, and then she'd work through her lunch hour so that she would go home an hour earlier to pick them up from the minder. And people, it's like crazy. It's like this whole thing is now on pause. And my son-in-laws, both of them, are working from home and doing more work than they ever did in 4 hours instead of traveling for an hour in the morning and the evening, and you know, and having, you know, coffee breaks and fag breaks and all that. So they're all actually being more productive in a shorter. So they're sharing their day. You take the kids for 3 hours, and then we do something together, and then, you know, you do your thing, and then it's all really very fair. The way they've all managed this. They do the yoga. I'm doing the yoga as well. I never thought I had time to do yoga.
Totally.
What the fuck was I doing? Like, you know what I mean? Doing a yoga class every day now online, and there's all these people, and we don't see each other when we're doing it. We just see our teacher Teresa, and you know, I had one this morning. It went on for 2 hours. We did a yoga and meditation. Wow! It's like, wow! Like, you know, why have I not been doing this for the past 5 years? How could I have been so busy? Not to be able to do this at least 3 times a week, you know, and I'm doing it 5 days a week, you know. So yeah, but you know, I do. I am going to miss my gigs, but at the same time, I really, really, really thought I was going to go insane when the gigs were cancelled, and I didn't. So all the gigs were moved into September. And on Wednesday evening, the promoter said, okay, well, September is not going to happen now either. And I had, the Woman Undone show was going up to the Arctic Arts Festival, and I had gigs up in Iceland, and I had Glastonbury and everything, and they're all gone.
Oh, no.
Killer.
No.
And I really thought that I would absolutely die, but I didn't. And I didn't drink, and I didn't, you know, it's just so far away from me now. I'm just so happy to be where I am. But, and then the offer said, well, actually, we're going to try and move all the acts into next year that we couldn't do this year. And so, you know, it's going to work out. And it's awful. It's really brought into focus how badly countries are run in relation to hospitals and healthcare, and, you know, and how manic we are in our lives, in our daily lives, with rushing and jumping around, and, you know, like headless chicken.
I've been saying it for a long time here in Ireland about the medical, you know, about the health. I mean, they've been talking about beds in Ireland for as long as I can remember, you know, and I kind of
but it's also
highlighted the whole situation now. You know, I think in Europe we're second last per million people for the amount of free beds that we had for in the whole of Europe, you know.
Yeah.
Which is,
but you know, people are not going to hospital either. People are not going to hospital like they used to. It seems that, you know, like, you know, God forbid, and you go to, I broke my ankle a few years ago, I was waiting for like 10 hours in A&E. You know, now there's nobody in A&E. Were people just going there because they had the flu or something? I think it's going to change the way, you know, nowadays, you know, when the flu comes again, the flu, like, not this thing.
Yeah.
Because you're always supposed to stay at home, go to bed, and have a Lemsip. There's nothing, we can't give you antibiotics. We can't give you. So I think people are just going to have to do that instead of rushing to doctors and hospitals, you know, for help. And maybe it will change, and that will be good. I don't know what else is going to change. I hope people's home lives change, because that will be for the better.
I think we'll be a little bit more grateful as well for our small freedoms. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
I think that I always kind of had a bit of gratitude for small things, like ever since before I give up drugs and so, or after I give up drugs. But I think now, even going for a cup of coffee with a friend, it's a very valuable thing, you know. Me and Mick used to have little mandates on a Friday night there. Mandates for some food night, you know, just small little things like that, getting out for 1 hour. You know, I'm a hibernator as it is. Like, I don't need people around me a lot, but it's just those couple of hours a week where I would meet people. You know, you really, really miss it, you know.
Well, Mary, feeding back into what you were saying about being a grandmother and those little things, I think what kind of, for me, what like finding that kind of beauty in the simple things in life, or what people think are ordinary, is that connection to the fact that it was so close to not being there. You know what I mean? That you know how lucky we are to be in this position, to have not just like went down the drain, where, like, you know, the way our lives were going, and that like we could have easily lost the opportunity to do that. And I think leading to what this could do, I feel, you know, is that things that we took for granted. I know it sounds corny and all that type of thing, but I genuinely think that it's like things we took for granted. I hope anyway that's going to stay with me. I believe it will. They say 28 days to get a habit. You know, I believe that because this has gone on so long, that it's going to be like, you know what I mean?
3 years.
Like, exactly, yeah. So it's like, but that when it starts coming back, I hope the gratitude for these simpler things is gonna remain. I believe it will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we had a kind of a Skype call with the family yesterday, and we all talked about that. We all talked about. I said, what do you think will be left? What will we hold on to, you know, when this is gone? Like, what things will you keep, you know? And one of my son-in-laws said, well, I'm just not going to work anymore. I'm going to say, I'm going to say I have been more productive in the past 5 weeks working 4 hours a day from my living room than I have been for 3 years in the job. You know, and all that grief about buses and trams and Lewis's and everything. What is that about?
I know.
But then they thought, well, then there's the natural, you know, you want to meet with people and, you know, have the coffee at the coffee break. So maybe people will just like take a happy kind of like, you know, maybe go to work 2 days a week or whatever, and work from home and have the social thing, and not have the constant, and that's what all my 4 adult children that work out in the workplace with their husbands and spouses and whatever, that's what they're hoping will happen from this, you know, that the pressure from work, because there was always this huge pressure to be performing and to be doing this and doing that, you know, and I think even if that, so that some sort of normal kind of life can happen at home, you know, for people, it'd be nice.
Yeah,
and everyone's walking. Like, how bad can that be?
Yeah,
even me.
People who didn't walk before. I definitely think there would need to be a balance. I mean, I worked for the last 6.5 years from home. That was my job, sitting in front of the computer, working for a company based in Ireland. And I think you definitely need some sort of middle ground, because I started becoming a bit of a recluse in some ways. I was losing social skills, if that makes any sense. I found myself, and then I took over a business last year, and going back into that of being in front of people, selling, chatting to people, I found it took time for me to get back into conversational skills again. You know what I mean? Because I've been so used to getting up from my bed and walking into the office and starting work. You know what I mean?
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, it's great.
That's something I've only started to really do recent enough. I was a photographer for most of my life, so I was always out. I was very social and stuff. But in more recent years, I would have lived in Australia and London and places like that for a while. And since I've come back to Ireland, I've kind of went into a different kind of role where I spend a lot of time on my own. And I noticed that what you're saying, Danny, those social skills deteriorate fairly rapidly, you know, and that those skill of being a recluse kind of comes into it, you know. It does scare me a little bit. But I do think there is a nice fine balance. I started working out of a co-working space just to actually meet people a couple of days a week, you know. So you have that kind of human element to feel like you have a real job.
It's definitely important.
Yeah, but the human thing is like you know, it's nicer to be able to. I don't know. When I'm working. I'm out there meeting people all the time, traveling, you know, checking, you know, and I love my time on my own. But like, this is just like too much, you know.
This is a lot.
And that I was walking the first 18 days that we were like seriously locked up. We weren't as seriously locked up as we are now. I was walking. I was averaging about 7 kilometers a day, but I was in my head all the time, thinking about it. You know, freaking out about it. What is it? Is it a conspiracy theory? Are they just trying to kill old people? And then Teresa, the yoga teacher, said, "I'm going to set an online yoga thing." And then it was that whole thing of just getting out of the head and into the body, you know, and just trying to get into awkward positions when you can't really think about it. It's just a huge relief, you know. And now I'm getting nervous about, God, we'll be able to talk to people again. How are we going to meet up? What are we going to talk about?
I'm sure you'll be grand.
Fucking what?
I'm sure you'll be grand.
We'll be talking about this forever.
Yeah, it'll be the new weather.
It'll be the new weather. That's a good point. Weather and COVID.
My family, my family were huggers, like, you know what I mean. So every time we meet, and every time we'd leave, it'd be a hug, you know. And I've gone to my mother a couple of times, like, you know what I mean, and masks and gloves and distance and all this, you know what I mean. And it's really weird, really, really weird. I find it very uncomfortable, like, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's something, if I'm honest, that's something that I'm looking forward to. It's just that relaxing thing of like, you meet a neighbor and you're not going, shit, 2 meters, like, or, you know, that I can meet me. I haven't seen my daughter in weeks. I haven't given her a hug in weeks. You know, my son is here with my partner, but my daughter's older, she's not here. And you know, just to give her a hug, you know, like, in a way. And it's like those simple things for me, genuinely, like, you know what I mean? It's like, there'll be massive gratitude. I hope that stays with me, but there will be massive gratitude when that comes back, you know, 100%.
Yeah, my grandson, I look after him. He's 18 months now. I look after him every morning while my daughter works in stables up the road. She teaches horse riding and she books out stables, you know, so he would stay here. So from when he was about 6 weeks old, I've been looking after him every morning that I'm here.
Deadly.
And it's just like, these little fat place, I can't touch it, you know, and it's awful. And these little wrists, you know, the little wrists, they have all these little fatty bits, and God, I just miss him so much, you know. But I do see him. I have a lung disease called bronchiectasis, and I use 3 or 4 inhalers. It's not something, I don't know what it is really. It's just a deterioration of my lungs. And the best thing you can do for it is breathing and singing. And so I'm lucky, because the guy who diagnosed it, he said, if you were sitting in an office job here, you'd be breathing, you'd be using oxygen at this stage of your life with the kind of lifestyle that you've led. So my kids are just terrified of me catching anything, so they're keeping well away, you know. So it's really hard, but in no way, I would not be that careful. I would be out there just touching them and hanging with them, but I can't, and they're being so respectful and not coming near me. So I'm you know, I'm dying for it to be over, and I'm dying to see how people will be, you know, when we get a vaccine. I don't even know what it's all about, do you?
No. Me and Mick, I've said that to Mick a few times, and Danny, we'll be chatting in the group. I'm like, wow, I said, I don't really even understand what it's all about. You know, one day I'm, you know, looking at it and I'm terrified. For the first couple of weeks, Mary, I had bad anxiety at nighttime. I'd be walking into shops to pick up stuff, like, and I'd be looking at people. I just see germs everywhere. I'd see the potential, and I just had to let it go. I don't know where the switch came from, but now I just do what I do. Like, I do the simple things, washing the hands, that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And it's religiously, I do it now. but I had to be able to let that go. I was destroyed. It was really getting on to me, you know, like getting into me. It was a strain. I worry about stuff as it is, like, you know what I mean? But it got really bad for a little while. And even a couple of my friends would be ringing. We'd be thinking we had symptoms every day, like, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I wouldn't be going out.
Got a sweat on.
That one of the symptoms, you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't be going outside the door, you know what I mean? I think I was after catching it. My girlfriend would cough and I'd look over at her.
I was reading the Irish Times this morning, and it's a foolish enough thing to do. And Fintan O'Toole had, you know, and he said, look, it's just like as if we've been waiting for something to happen. Because in January, in the beginning of January, it must have been the end of the year, ERSI did a poll. They survey, you know, they do all these surveys. Do you know what the ERSI is? I don't know what it stands for. Economic Social Research. I don't know. They go around to people's houses and they fill in forms. They ask questions. You sign up to be part of these things, and 70% of the people that they asked in Ireland were very unhappy, were very worried, were very concerned about some awful catastrophe that was going to happen. And I know my grandchildren were out marching on the streets for the day off school, you know, the thing where they all left the classroom to go. And it was like just this kind of impending gloom and doom. And it was palpable, you know. People were really scared. Something's going to happen, you know. And here it is. Here it is. We're living in this, you know, thing now. And if you look at all of the graphs where the pollution has gone down and fish have started to swim in Venice, and did you see the dolphins in Venice jumping up in the canals? And it's just like this extraordinary thing that has happened, you know. But anyways, the thing they were saying in the two articles that I read, and I just said, fuck it, it was getting more depressed. Is this what's happening? And is this what is going to wake us up, you know, to this bullshit economy boom that was, you know, we were, you know, Ireland was going to be making 2 billion a day or something for the next, the first year from building and, you know, offices. And if this new thing that happens that people start to say, I don't need to go to work, there's not going to be any use for those buildings that they're building all over Ireland. Those huge big cranes in the sky. And it always seems like that a person's health and wealth of the country is always in terms of their economy.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh God, Jesus, did you see all the cranes in Dundrum? My God, I counted 11. Jesus, was 17 over. Like all this is like the greatest thing that's ever happened. We've been here before, you know. Those times it's gone. I think that's really gone now. I think a lot of people, and I think people will become, you know, more organic, community-based projects. I have that feeling, and I know that in my business, forget about it. Is out for the next 2 years, you know. All the gigs in America, like the big venues, they're not even going to book artists until September 2021.
Wow.
So it's going to be small and local, and that's fine, you know, if we can figure out a way to make. My musicians are really suffering because we might have had, you know, some gigs every so often, and then they give lessons, but they can't give lessons anymore, you know. And I'm spending an awful lot less money. I did a gig on the 7th of March in Tinnahealy in Wicklow, in the courthouse, the art centre. Put petrol in my car, and it's still there.
Deadly.
I go to old people's. I'm in the elder group, so I go to old people shopping, you know, and in and out. All my list is there. I'm in and out because I fucking don't want to be meeting anyone. I'm in and out in 20 minutes, and then I go to the fruit and veg shop yesterday, and that was it. I make bread, which I haven't done for years. I'm eating it also, and cake and everything. It's like fuck, you know. I'm doing things that I haven't done for 30 years, you know.
It ain't all bad, it's not to say.
I made flapjacks the other day. I was shocked at that.
Made what?
flapjacks at the house. I wouldn't be making that stuff, you know. I literally went out, bought all that stuff and made flapjacks. You know, the flapjacks. They're like an
Brilliant.
oats. Yeah, which
Mary,
I'd never have time to do that.
Mary, you were saying as part of your treatment for your lung, or would you say disorder, it's singing. Is there any chance you're going to give yourself a bit of therapy and sing us a song?
Fuck off. Oh, Jesus.
I've never heard
nice on Mick.
I've never heard that one. But,
I forgot.
That's my favorite
Smooth,
song.
Mick. Smooth.
That's my favorite song. Fuck off.
What is? What is?
No, I was joking when you said to him, "Fuck off."
I had the words of the song there a while ago. I'm useless when I put on the spot. Sure. Oh, that's my grandson's little toy. It just fell on the floor there. Sure, what do you want me to sing?
Well, I'd rather go blind.
Oh no, I can't sing that. I can't sing that without him. I started to sing a song when I was walking up the hills the other day. I sing a song every day when I walk in Wicklow, and I put it up online. Not every day. I've done about 23 of them at this stage. And this one was very popular, so much so that Ray Darcy picked up on it and they played it on the radio, and he had me on talking about it. And sometimes I forget the words, so I probably will now again. Smile though your heart is breaking, smile even though it's aching. When there's a cloud in the sky, you'll get by. If you plow through your pain and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll find the sun is shining through. If you just smile. That kind of thing. I do that kind of thing. When I'm
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks very
I
much.
always forget the
Bravo.
words, so, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
So,
Mary, you're doing your online. You're doing your online concerts as well. We were looking at them.
Yeah,
there
yeah.
on
I'm going to
Facebook
do.
Live.
Hopefully, when I did a couple of things Facebook Live just to make announcements, and I sang a few songs, and then we're going to do when we can all leave home on or shortly after May the 5th. The band are coming up here and we're going to broadcast a concert, but I will give everybody plenty of notice about it. A lot of people look at I'm looking at Little John Nee in Galway doing a show tonight, a one-man show. Yeah. And people are just doing stuff all over the place, you know. And so I'm going to look at that later on tonight, and I do the yoga online. So there's a lot of stuff happening that I'm doing. And
when do you think you'll be releasing the new album? Have you got a plan for a date set, or are you going to put it off until this is over?
The new album?
Yeah, the new album.
Well, I'm going to be 64 in May, and I was going to release it. It's called 64, and I was going to release it in May. And then I thought, well, we'd hold off until July because we'd be the gigs from April, May and June. We're going into September, October, and November. But now they're probably not going to happen. Vicar Street might happen on the 1st of October, but nobody's telling anything. Nobody knows anything until July, the second week of July. All the promoters are holding off on those decisions. Because if you do a gig in Vicar Street, it holds 1,200 people, but they're saying they'll only let 500 in. So how does that become possible for the venue to make any money, to keep the staff going? I have to pay the band, you know. Will they stream it live and people make donations? I don't know. I just want to do a gig so desperately. But we will do one here in the house. And I know Maria Doyle Kennedy does one on Friday nights, and there's people doing them everywhere, and it's quite nice, you know. It's not bad, is it?
No, it's not.
I mean, you miss the human contact, but when you do the Facebook, people put up little smiley things and everything, and you see that they're there, and it really warms your heart, you know, that people are there, and then you try and, you know, make it relevant, you know. So I would really like to have the lads here, my pianist here, and do some songs, do something proper, you know.
And it's just to say to people like that, like artists really have gotten hit hard by this, and they were the first ones affected, and they'll be the last ones that will come back, you know. And
the first ones affected,
And anyone that, if you can just support your local artists, if you can, like, you know what I mean, think about it. That's who brings the beauty into the world, you know what I mean? It's like, that's all that stuff that like brings that little bit of sunshine into your life, you know what I mean? That's what these people do, you know what I mean? So just support them when you get a chance.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, and I mean, an awful lot of young bands are really struggling. I've had the good fortune to be at this such a long time, but like, they're just like, and Irish music, all the music organizations all over the world seem to have set up broadcast sites, and you could just like donate €1 and stuff like that to people, and you know, you get like a few euros, keeps people going, you know.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to do that when we do the gig. We'll do a proper gig, and we'll set up a donate button, and we've just decided that we'll just divide it up between us equally, you know, and see how it goes, and see if people want it, and maybe do another one, you know. And who knows how long this is going to go on, you know.
God knows. Well, listen, Mary, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
That naturally brings us to the end of the show. We really appreciate you coming on. It's been excellent.
Really do.
You know, really, really good.
And thanks for having me. And yeah, I thought it was going to be awful, but it's grand.
We're not that bad.
most people can never shut me up anyways once I start talking. So
that's the idea.
So, and I hope to stay safe. And you know, so are you on all the time on the air? Like
we are now.
We've so much time now. Yeah, 100%.
We've only recently started doing the video side of it. We've been doing a podcast for over a year now.
Oh,
this is number 29 of our podcast.
Yeah, I saw the last two. I looked at the last one. You sent me the link, so I look at you now on the. I like the little logo with the lads and the crack and all that.
The lads and the crack.
Have some fun and go and eat some more flapjacks. And I'm going to make dinner now.
Mary, it's been an honor. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
God bless.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Got to listen to that good crack. Calling